Hi everyone, my name is Doron Nir. I'm the CEO of actually quite a new startup. It's my first conference as a CEO of this startup called Stream Elements. What we're building is a platform for engagement and monetization for streamers. If you've ever watched Twitch, then you know what these guys are doing, and we're helping them do it better and make more money while doing it better. So that's Stream Elements, and also I'm part of the founders of GameIS. So if you're not a member of the GameIS group on Facebook yet, please join us. Be part of the Israeli game industry, whether you live here or not. We're always happy to have new members. Thank you so much, Torsten, for taking this time and doing this session. Let's start. I saw, I think it was back in 2003, a TED Talk. Was that you, actually? So I saw a talk in 2003, and you presented something really nice, which was sort of like how to make animation of characters more believable and more realistic. And then several years later, you have a massively successful game company. How did that happen?
So yeah, it was me in 2003. I think it was in February 2003 doing a TED Talk. This was around the time when we spun off our company, NaturalMotion, from Oxford University. So it's a spin-out company. And I was studying there trying to create essentially the interplay between neural networks and physically simulated characters to see whether I could get these characters to walk using fundamental principles of biology. And I managed to get that to work. And the result was that you had systems and creatures that were fully interactive.
You did that as part of an academic research?
Correct, yeah. I was doing a PhD.
Okay. And how did this evolve into a game company?
So initially the idea was just to use this technology for games and license it out. And in fact, we were able to do that. So our biggest customer is Rockstar Games. They use our Euphoria technology for their games. For example, Grand Theft Auto 4 or 5 or Red Dead Redemption uses our Euphoria technology. And the idea is that you have fully interactive characters. So rather than playing back in animation that you pre-produce, we actually simulate the full character. And you can see that if you play GTA, for example, and interact with any character, whether it's nudging them maybe with your car, or whether it's the slightly more violent stuff like shooting, that's driven by our tech. But we realized after a while that, in particular, the iPhone was becoming fast enough to run our technology in real time. So we decided to try it ourselves and use our technology on an iPhone.
Was the business of providing middleware to companies like Rockstar good enough to sustain the company?
Absolutely, and it's still a business now. Obviously, it's still an important part of our business right now. We still have a huge number of customers. In fact, our customer base is growing. But the games business took off much, much faster once we started to make games.
So what was the decision basically? It was, okay, we're selling the software, it's going on very nicely, but we want to make games as well. What did you start with?
The decision was around 2010, 2011. When we looked at the market, we felt that there was a lot of a waste of an amazing machine, the iPhone in particular, that wasn't really used to its fullest extent. And we felt that there was an opportunity to create these really rich experiences for audiences, essentially the entire general public, that wasn't just simple 2D city builders, basically. And that's what we wanted to try out. And our first game that we made was a game called Backbreaker, which is an American football game. And what we tried to do was really make it very straightforward to play. So it's all about running down a field and trying to avoid being tackled. But it was using our technology to do the tackles. And that was kind of the USP. So with every game we've done since, what we've been trying to do is really wow people, do something different to what other game developers have done, and really make the game feel so rich and so beautiful and so fun to play that once you see it, someone else playing it, or you see it on the App Store, you just want to download it.
So let's fast forward a bit and start talking about CSR. CSR doesn't necessarily seem in line with what you're describing on the technology side, because it doesn't involve any human body movement or animations. It's cars, basically. Can you tell a little bit on how you made the decision to develop that?
Yeah, so we made 5 paid games first, and they were mainly sports games, with the exception of Zynga, to which we are the license holders. And then we made the decision to switch to free-to-play because it was becoming clear around the time, this is 2011, 2012, that free-to-play was going to be much bigger again as a business model. So we first made a game called My Horse. And that was a bit of a finger up to everyone because we wanted to make a horse game just for the sake of it. And we really tried to do something that was...
What was the budget?
I can't actually remember exactly what the budget was, but it wasn't that cheap, right? I mean, we tried to make it as realistic as possible, rather than kind of treating it as a game that you would snigger at and make it all pink and, you know, My Little Pony-like. We wanted to create the most realistic horse you'd ever seen. I have to admit, I don't particularly like horses, which was a problem.
Did it involve everything? Cleaning up after it, feeding it?
Yes, and you can still download it now if you want to try it out afterwards. But it was a game that we were very proud of, and even though we made many mistakes in terms of the free-to-play aspect, it made more money than the 5 paid games we had done.
Just by being free-to-play?
Just by being free-to-play and charging for tack, saddles, hats for horses, etc. But I'm not a particular horse fan, and I don't really know very much about horses. But I do
Who was
like
the product lead for that?
It was actually, so I initially designed the game, and the product was saved by our chief product officer, Barclay Deeming, who joined us around the time, and he was a professional show jumper, so
I see.
he made it much more realistic.
He had a much better product insight into the horse ecosystem.
But I did know something about cars, and I really like cars, and we have a whole bunch of people who are very passionate about cars, and we realized when we were making My Horse that there were a whole bunch of car games on the market, but they didn't conform to what we call the Starbucks line test, which means that you need to be able to start and finish a game session whilst you're waiting for your espresso to arrive. And that was really important because in most car racing games, you go around a track several times, it takes several minutes, and you can't take your eye off it. So we felt, what if we make car racing much, much simpler? What it's about my car compared to your car, and it's in a straight line, and it's about, you know, how you get off the line and how you shift. And that's what CSR Racing became. But the more important part even was not just the play pattern, it was because we realized that fundamentally it's about the cars, and it's about creating a collection of cars and making those cars look as beautiful as possible. And if you owned a car in CSR Racing, it needed to feel a little bit like you owned that car in the real world. That really was the big driver for everything.
So I want to go back to what you said about the gameplay mechanics, and we were just having a discussion during lunch about that. When I played CSR for the first time, I was blown away by the gap between how beautiful and well-produced the cars were, and the tracks and the environments, and how simple the game mechanics are. And you basically narrowed down the entire experience of drag racing into gear shifting and starting the race. Is there even a moment where you play the game as a prototype and say, man, this is a winner. I know this is a winner. Because it seems like you left so much of racing outside the game that it felt to me like a very bold game design decision.
We had a moment, I had a specific moment when I was in San Francisco, and I spent a weekend there, and we had got prototypes of the game, and we'd been working on it for a couple of months, and we had originally an energy mechanic in the game, and then we took it out because it wasn't really working. We called it tickets. And I kept playing the game, and I started and finished the entire game twice throughout an entire weekend because I couldn't put it down. And at that point, I realized, actually, this mechanic works really well, and I think we might have a winner. But I also realized we have to have an energy mechanic back in the game, otherwise we can't control play patterns at all. But there was a very specific day where we realized, actually, this is probably going to work.
Was it your decision, basically? I mean, you played it, and based on your hunch or gut feeling, this was the moment where you decide, okay, I'm going to commit this amount of budget to make this beautiful because the gameplay is solid enough? Yeah,
it was a joint decision, to be honest. I mean, it was me, it was Barclay, and a whole bunch of other people who played the game, and we realized this is worth investing in.
How long after making that decision and having that weekend did the game launch?
8 months later.
Okay. And 8 months later, how long from the point it launched till you realized that your hunch was right and you know, this is actually going to be your biggest seller so far?
Well, it was interesting because we had soft launched My Horse a few months earlier and then went into hard launch. So we had some ideas on some of the territories that we were soft launching in, how they would scale up to the whole world. And when we soft launched CSR Racing, this was around the time when we showed it at the Apple keynote in June, I think, July 2012. The game was in soft launch, and using the My Horse data, we were able to extrapolate what this would scale up to when we would go into full launch. And the revenues were so high that when I announced them in the board meeting, and I said, I think we might make this much money, I literally had people laughing. And I was laughing too, because it seemed like the figures seemed crazy at the time.
Is it a crazy laugh or a happy laugh?
It was a crazy laugh, crazy and nervous. Crazy and nervous, because it felt like it was completely off. And when we then actually launched the game, the revenues were twice as high again as we had predicted from that soft launch.
Oh dear.
And this was one of those moments where, sometimes you have those moments where, something happens beyond your wildest dreams. It doesn't happen very often in life, but sometimes it happens. And when it happens, it's pretty amazing. And that was one of those moments.
So how long did you work on CSR Racing before you started thinking about doing a CSR too?
Quite some time, to be honest. We launched the game, and it ended up becoming the top grossing game of all time at the time. And then Clash of Clans came out and was a lot more successful again. But we realized that this game was going to be able to produce revenues for quite some time. And one of our big deficits around the time was that we had designed a game to look good and to launch well and to monetize pretty well and have a lot of users, but we didn't really know how to run LiveOps. And that was one of our biggest deficits. So it took us a while to really start to learn it. And if you look at the chart performance of the game now, the historical chart performance charted really high, obviously #1 top grossing, and then went down. Then we released multiplayer for Christmas and went up again. And then it took us a while to really stem the kind of revenues going down. And that really only happened after the acquisition by Zynga, where we started to think properly about LiveOps and were able to reverse the trend.
Can you maybe tell a little bit about how the mindset of the product, or I don't know, how do you look at a game when you say that you weren't that good at LiveOps? What are you talking about? You're not talking about technical stability.
Correct. I mean, actually, technical stability is part of it, but at a really trivial level, thinking about your roadmap, thinking what features are going to come up over time, and making sure that they hit at the right point. That's kind of the obvious stuff. But what we didn't do right around the time was to really try and think about what KPIs every feature will drive and be very systematic about it. We were still all coming from a direction of let's create something fun, let's update the game, let's keep it fresh for the player, but not necessarily what KPIs do we want to drive.
Was it difficult for the company to align to this new methodology? Because it seems like a point where a fun game studio matures to the point where it's a major business and people have a lot less freedom and a lot less creativity in what they do.
Very good question, because it was difficult in some senses because a lot of our designers are from the console industry and they make things that are fun, and that makes a lot of sense, and so do we. But it's not just enough to create fun stuff. Obviously, you need to be able to pay the bills as well from a LiveOps game. And I think that that mental shift is not that straightforward. And I think it's easier for some, gaming cultures than for others. But the British games industry in particular was very, obviously, console focused. And yet we need those people to think around free-to-play too. So that took us a while to achieve. And we only really started to properly get it, honestly, after we got a lot of input from Zynga, in particular on the product management side.
So the Zynga acquisition actually helped on that?
Yeah, I think it was crucial.
So my biggest question around CSR2 is basically we all talk about the high costs of user acquisition. And when you have a game that makes money and is already installed on millions and millions of devices, when does it make sense to say, okay, we're going to start a new one and we're going to start everything from zero?
I think it depends on the game. You want to hit it at a point where the original game obviously is still pretty strong. You don't want to do it so late that the original game is completely waned, so there isn't any kind of cultural resonance or any users playing it anymore. But you don't want to do it so early either that it cannibalizes the original game. So that's pretty important. I think you want to find the right balance in between. And then you also want to do it when you have a game that is truly differentiated. If it is too similar to the first one, then it won't make that much sense for people to switch over. And that's why we took our time to make CSR2 as good as we could do.
Let's talk a bit about the acquisition by Zynga. Zynga didn't have a really great reputation in acquisitions, I think up to your acquisition. I think probably the most successful one from their perspective. And talent left after some of their acquisitions, and games that were acquired were found out to be less successful. How was the experience for you guys?
It's interesting because acquisitions in general can always be difficult because you have two cultures coming together. The reason why the acquisition happened in the first place and why both parties wanted to do it is because it genuinely felt like we were complementing each other. And I know that can very often be lip service and it's how you justify things when an acquisition happens, but it really was the case. And my best example for me is the PMing culture, product management, which we didn't have. And at the same time, I think where we were able to contribute to Zynga is creating products that really wow, that really have a sizzle. And what we felt was if we can combine both, if we can create something that people want to download and then we can keep them there because we know how to do LiveOps, that's a really strong combination.
So when the acquisition happened, how does this exactly work? I mean, do people from Zynga hop over to your side of the pond and start explaining to you how to run product, the way they do with poker and Farmville, or how does the knowledge transfer happen?
Yeah, to be honest, completely honest, we actually asked for it. So we asked for people to come over as much as possible, and in particular, we needed it on CSR Racing, the original game. And so we had PMs from Zynga in San Francisco embedded in Brighton at our Boss Alien studio, where CSR Racing, is in LiveOps. And they helped us try to think about what features need to come up in order to drive certain KPIs. And even to this day, it's the same thing. I mean, we ask for a lot of Zynga people to come over, and they kindly do come over and spend time with us, in particular in London right now, to work together on our games. At the same time, we have people go over to San Francisco, obviously, regularly too. But it can't work if it's forced. It needs to be something that both parties really want.
So, okay. Can we talk about Dawn of Titans? Because before we came on stage, you said it's a little bit in the works now.
Well, we're in a quiet period right now as a company. Obviously, it's a public company, and we've announced, obviously, a launch this year. And that's all I can say right now. I wish I could say a lot more, but I think I'm not allowed to say more.
Just on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you about Dawn of Titans?
I'm super excited. I've always been super excited about the game. Super excited about the game. But that's all I can say.
Can we talk a little bit about Clumsy Ninja?
Of course.
What was the rationale behind it? I mean, it seemed so off the chart from what you did before that. I actually didn't know about the horse game, so maybe now that I'm more familiar with it, it seems more in line. But it seemed so off the chart. What were you trying to do there?
We tried to create the first fully interactive character that you really believed was real. And it turns out that you need a lot of technology to make that happen. You also need really good character design to make that happen. But at the end of the day, what I think we are all in the entertainment industry. And yes, we can talk about user acquisition and distribution and everything else. But we're here to do something really cool, as far as I'm concerned. We're here to create entertainment experiences that didn't exist before. And that isn't always easy, but very often it is something that is different to anything else. And we've always tried to take those risks, whether it's a car racing game where you don't steer, whether it's a character like Clumsy Ninja that is fully interactive, or now coming up Dawn of Titans. We want to make things that are different to everything else. And that's how Clumsy Ninja came about as well. We thought, what if we can make a character that is so real that you think it actually lives on your phone?
Was it successful from your perspective?
It's very successful, yeah. It was a very profitable game. It didn't make as much money as CSR Racing did, but it still made more than we had expected.
See, very well. So what is the future for NaturalMotion beyond the launch of Dawn of Titans? I mean, if we're going to talk 3 years from today, what are you going to be working on? And specifically, are you going to still be in mobile games?
Yes, we will be. Mobile is a huge opportunity, and for everything else that's out there in terms of new excitements coming up, VR, etc., and I'm very interested in VR, mobile is where the business is, and mobile is, I think, where a lot of innovation is still possible.
You don't have the itch to do console games or
no,
free-to-play PC?
Console is too small a market. I think it's become a pretty small niche market compared to now mobile gaming. I think we announced previously that even the original CSR franchise has now been played by more than 2% of the world's population, and those figures are very hard to achieve with console.
That's true.
I think it's too small a market, but in terms of where we are going to go as NaturalMotion, we know what we want to do, and that is to make games that wow people, to really innovate and do something different to everyone else. But we also like going into genres that other people are not in yet.
Do you think you're going to do any more franchises?
What do you mean, spin-offs or?
No. I mean, sorry. I meant doing games that are based on external IPs, movies, IPs that come from other places. You mentioned previously that you had the Zynga game. The fact that you didn't do more of that probably means that you didn't feel you needed that to get meaningful business going.
Well, the Zynga game is interesting because we loved making that, and it's fundamentally a paid game. We've never transferred it to free-to-play, but whenever we make it briefly free, it just shoots up in the charts. It's a very strong brand, so it definitely helps with downloads. We also made a game called NFL Rivals, which was essentially Backbreaker, but an NFL version. And I do think that franchises and brands can work and can make a difference. In our cases, we usually start with a game idea, and we think, wouldn't it be cool if? That's how we started Dawn of Titans, for example. We thought, wouldn't it be cool if you could have armies of thousands of people, all controllable in real time by a finger, and have Titans leading those armies. That's how we started. And sometimes it makes sense to think of a brand, but most of the time we think of the game idea first, and we try and make it our own IP.
So we don't have a lot more time, several minutes, and I do want to talk a little bit about product culture. There are a lot of stories, everybody's looking to the most successful companies for their product culture, and you mentioned Zynga, and we know a lot of stories about the product culture of Supercell, and the fact that they scrape a ton of prototypes before they make a decision to start a new game. How does it work for you guys?
So, as I said, I mean, the first thing that almost always happens is that we think, wouldn't it be cool? And then we come up with a theme. Very often it's a theme, or maybe it's an idea from a technology point of view that we think could be really cool if we can turn it into gameplay. So most of our ideas...
Can you give an example? Not from any...
Well, Clumsy Ninja is the best example. So Clumsy Ninja was a game where we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we can make this fully interactive character with technology, which is the Euphoria tech that runs in GTA 2, that didn't exist before on mobile. That was the idea. The trick is then to make that commercial in a way that it actually resonates at a mass market level, and that means tens of millions of download. And Clumsy Ninja is an example where we had all the tech ready, and we had a technology and a prototype called Euphoria Toy that had almost all of the technologies in it, but the character was not interesting. And because the character wasn't interesting, no one was interested at all. So it was only when we refined the character and we changed it to the ninja, and it was called Clumsy Ninja, that all of a sudden it really worked.
What was the special sauce? I mean, I'm assuming it's not just the ninja outfit.
It wasn't a ninja outfit. Clumsy Ninja as a name worked because immediately people thought about what that might be. And then we have amazing character artists who spend, honestly, a lot of time just iterating together with the creative team to make the character really resonate. And then, even though we always want to do cool stuff and new stuff that we invent, we do focus test a lot as well to make sure that the character resonates.
How does that work? You bring people to the office?
Yeah, so we usually start with small scale, literally bringing people into the office in Oxford or in London or in Brighton, and letting them play the game or give us feedback on character designs, etc. And then we do another set that is usually larger scale, that is online focus testing.
Got it. Okay, so other than what you're doing in NaturalMotion, when you look at the mobile space, which companies are you looking at and seeing, wow, these guys are doing amazing work? I'm really impressed by their product or by their marketing, by the way they do branding or the way they do LiveOps. Which of your competitors are you appreciative of?
I think there's a whole bunch, and I'm going to have to give the boring answer, which is Supercell. I think Supercell are the most impressive ones in terms of coming up with new IP, coming up with ideas that sometimes are quite different to everyone else's, but also as a company having stayed very humble and still trying to do something cool and new for the user. To me, they are the most interesting ones and the most impressive ones. We know all how hard it is to create a big hit. Even if you have a large user base that you can cross-promote from, there's still no guarantee that you can make a big hit. And the fact that they've done that repeatedly is super impressive.
Okay, I want to open this now to questions if anybody has them.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It was very interesting. I would like to ask, after Zynga got in, how much did CSR Racing really improve? Like, if you could say in percentage-wise, like if the user value is like the KPI.
I can't give you exact figures because I don't think I'm allowed to. But
estimate if you can.
Well, what you can do is look into any of the charts, services. For example, look into App Annie and look at what happened to the game from summer 2014 onwards. There you can see that with the same level of base marketing activity, the game was growing in the top grossing charts again. So we were focusing on two things. It was monetization and it was retention.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Torsten.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.